Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. This is the first video that's made especially for Painting 1 students. It's a follow-up to the video 2 in the drawing with still life items. This is about finding stuff and then making it ready for painting still lifes. Let's get going, shall we?
Well, I look at it myself as the beginning, really, of an exploration. That's the reason we're exploring. You don't know what you'll run into on an exploration. What the sky looks like, what the stars look like. Do they still twinkle, or are they a steady light when you get outside the atmosphere?
So, you're a painting student, and you've done the scavenger hunt. You searched all over the house. You looked in the garage, you went to the patio, maybe checked out a shed. Hopefully it was yours. Anyway, you found some stuff. That's great. Really, here's our goal in choosing all of our candidates for anything that even has a chance to make it into our still life. It needs to be forms that are clear forms in the way that I talked about in the previous video. But also, it needs to be a form that's opaque, meaning it doesn't let light through. It shows light falling on the form. It needs to be a solid color as much as possible. If there's some variation, it needs to be very subtle so it doesn't distract you, or so little that it doesn't even matter. As much as possible, we'd like to avoid shiny surfaces, but given that our choices might be limited, that's the least of our worries. But here's the situation. You found some great forms. They're the kind of forms that you want to deal with, but some of them are like bottles or made of glass, like jars, and they're transparent, so they don't work very well for what we're gonna do. And that is dealing with shapes of value. We need something that's opaque. What do we do then? The other thing is, I might have some stuff that's also great, like, I don't know, an oatmeal box or something. I'd like to use that shape. It's a good cylinder, and I don't have a lot of other ones that I can use. What do? It's got all that package design on it, and that's going to be really difficult to deal with. Well, the key here is simplification, and we're going to simplify the surfaces, because we're concerned with the form and depicting the form and finding the relationships of those forms. So we don't want to get sidetracked or distracted or just confused about what's going on with those forms. Likewise, you might have some packaging of rectilinear forms, boxes and the like. And even your cardboard boxes have, I don't know, Amazon tape across it, and you can't take that off very easily. What do you do with that? Well, here are the solutions to both. First off, when you're dealing with the transparencies, the glass, the see-through, the plastic that you can see through, you're gonna use paint. So what kind of paint? Well, you've got a couple of options. The easiest, if you can find it, would be spray paint. Find spray paint and spray paint the glass. When you're looking to choose spray paint, couple of things you want to keep in mind. That would be, first off, hopefully it's not glossy paint. It's not a gloss shiny paint. That makes things a little difficult because shine creates reflections, and it also makes it difficult to see how the light's being cast on the form because we've got all the sparkles in front. What that means is, ideally, it's like a satin finish or a matte finish. That's the perfect solution if you have it. If you don't, still, the glossy paint's better than nothing. It still makes it opaque, and it'll work, just not as easily. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, that is the color that the paint actually is. What are we looking for in terms of color? Well, with your first still life, it's important that we not go crazy with all the bright colors in the crayon box. We want to keep it fairly minimal. We want to keep it subdued. As part of the purpose of this first painting is really putting you in a situation where you have to mix, where you have to figure out what the paint will do for you. What will it do for you? How can you get it to do it? That's mixing. So in order to mix more, we want to find colors that are actually less intense. That is, less saturated and less bright. Primarily, this means like browns, tans, beiges, not things like bright red, bright blue, bright yellow. While you can have a couple of those, you want to keep it minimal. And you don't want everything to be the same color, so hopefully if you have multiple transparencies that you're trying to turn into opacities, clear glass to a solid form, you want to have maybe a couple of options at least, not just one, and spray paint everything the same color. Maybe you have 2 or 3 colors that you can spray paint these that are maybe even in the same color family. They seem to have some relationship. That makes it a lot easier. But you know, things being what they are right now, you may not be able to just run out and get some spray paint if you don't have some already on hand. What do I do then? I don't know. Wait, I do know. Fooled you. Okay, so what are you gonna do is you're gonna use the paint you have, which is the acrylic paints. It's pretty easy to do this as well. It just takes longer. You wanna get your gesso and you wanna coat the surface of the object. Let it dry, and then you're gonna come back with the colored paint. Likewise, with what I was describing with the spray paint, you're also going to go with low intensity colors. That would be earth tones, that would be dull color, not bright color. Let's say you don't have gesso. Some of you I know don't. What do we do then? Well, then you can just paint the color directly on the object. It'll still work. It may just take an extra coat. And so those boxes that have tape on them, that have writing on them, that have labels on them, and I can't get the labels to come off, what do? Well, you'll wrap those boxes. What do you wrap them with? Well, if you have brown craft paper or even a paper bag from the grocery store that's large enough, you can flatten that out and wrap it around the box. Then you're gonna have a very clean surface that will show the faces of the planes of the box and the way the light hits them really clearly. If you don't have brown paper, you can also do the thing that I mentioned in the other video. That's taking the wrapping paper, the holiday paper, the birthday paper, and flipping it so that the printed side is against the box and the not printed side is out. So you'll have white paper. You'll have something that is, again, going to show your surfaces clearly. So you're surveying, you're looking at all the rest of your stuff that's not printed boxes and maybe not clear glass or plastic. You're looking around for those forms that are also a single color. Ideally, if you can find objects that are a single color, then that's going to tend to allow those values, those shapes of light and those shadows to be really clear to you, which is what we want for where we're going with this painting. You might have bowls, you might have dishes, you may have pictures, other unadorned or printed surfaces that are really good to use. Well, as you probably know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, one of my favorites to use is the terracotta pot. Terracotta pot is wonderful, like just a regular flower pot, different sizes, any size really. It's really great because that's the kind of color that I'm talking about, a low intensity earth tone color, and the surface is usually not super glossy, and it takes the light really well. It's also a simple form with a volume of space. We deal with the ellipses of the circle seen at the side. So it is something that is really good as an addition. Another thing you can use, pine boards. Pine boards, especially white pine, not so much yellow pine. The difference being white pine is the one that's just pretty much an even surface. in terms of color variation. With yellow pine, that's the one where you see all the wood grain and the knotholes, etc. And we don't want to deal with that. But if you have the white pine or any other kind of wood that is solid, that can be used in a lot of your still lifes. One last thing, scale, the size of these things. You don't want tiny, you don't want little bitty. You want stuff that's in this range. You know? It's not huge, these aren't huge, unless you've got a lot of space, and then you can build the architectural still lifes like I do in studio that you were working from on that first painting. But you want something related to the size of the space that you have to set up in. And you want these to be generally consistent. You want them to be in a range. It doesn't mean they have to be perfectly uniform. In fact, they shouldn't be perfectly uniform. There should be some variation. And finally, one more thing. I don't want to leave this out. You might want to find, and you probably should if you have them, you want to find draperies, things that you can put over other objects that maybe you couldn't wrap. Maybe you couldn't paint. And I'm talking primarily about the rectilinear forms here. You maybe have some old sheets. You maybe have a blanket or two. Any kind of cloth will work as long as it's solid. Don't get a print, don't get a stripe. Anything that's solid. One other thing, you want to make sure that its color is in a similar range to what I was describing earlier. It just needs to be calm. It can't have high intensities. It'll show everybody else up, and you don't want that, right? So once you've rounded up all the forms and you've altered them in such a way that they are usable, then what I'd like for you to do is to put them all in a group, take a photo of them, and send it to me, so that I can take a look at it, so you and I can have a dialogue about who your best candidates might be. So that's it. That wraps up our first video made exclusively for Painting One. I'm cool with that. I hope you are too, because I'll be back soon with 2 new videos also for Painting One. That is how to put together that still life and color. See you next time.
Well, I look at it myself as the beginning, really, of an exploration. That's the reason we're exploring. You don't know what you'll run into on an exploration. What the sky looks like, what the stars look like. Do they still twinkle, or are they a steady light when you get outside the atmosphere?